I will never forget when I figured out the quiet man no one had welcomed yet, sitting on my grandma's porch, was really my dad's long-lost uncle. My never-before-known uncle. You know, family reunions are always a mix of madness and hilarity. At least for my family anyway. There's too much food, screaming kids, folks drinking and yapping way too loudly about politics, and my grandma needing you to eat just one more plate like she's in some kind of unofficial competition with the world's buffet restaurants. This one, however, this reunion, proved to be different from all others. It started on one of those sweltering July afternoons when the entire world is damp and faintly perfumed with barbecue smoke. My Aunt Linda's place was where we held the reunion. A normal 2-story house with creaking wooden steps, wilted flower gardens, and one of those porches that won't quite support too many people standing on it. I was 26, which is that strange adult but not really an adult yet age. You know, old enough to be invited to bring a decent casserole and talk interest rates if needed, but not so old that the great aunties and uncles give you a pat on the cheek and ask when you're ever gonna settle down. Fun times. Anyway, I was in the kitchen with my cousins, trying to avoid another impromptu lecture from Aunt Linda about my modern haircut when I saw someone outside. I assumed at first that it was probably one of the neighbors just strolling over to be nosy, or maybe some long-lost relative who arrived fashionably late. This dude was lounging on the porch, rather slouched over, like he was exhausted. Jeans, bland t-shirt, and a worn-out baseball hat slouching low. Nothing about this dude was yelling family reunion life of the party, which, in my family, was essentially a crime against tradition. What struck me was the way no one else appeared to notice him. People passed right by him, carrying trays of potato salad, coolers of soda, buckets of fried chicken. But no one even greeted him. And yet, the way he just sat there, still, silent, his eyes scanning the yard as if he were taking it in photographically in his mind, I could not help but stare. I whispered to my cousin Maria, "Hey, who's that on the porch?" She glanced for half a second, shrugged, and shoved a deviled egg into her mouth. No idea. Either one of Grandpa's card friends or something. You know Grandpa invites half of town to these parties. I nodded, pretending to agree, but my chest tightened with an unfamiliar curiosity. Later, as I was setting out paper plates near the cooler containing beverages, I saw him again. And when the late sun hit his face at the exact right angle, there was this strange sense of familiarity there. Maybe around the eyes. Something I couldn't really put my finger on, but it bothered my brain like déjà vu. Flash forward to roughly an hour later, burgers were searing on the grill, kids were soaking each other with water balloons, and my dad was spinning the same old fishing story for maybe the 100th time. And then it happened. The quiet man who lived on the porch stood up. And boy, the mood changed. He approached the yard, uncertainly, as if entering a room full of laughter, but not sure if he is supposed to be there. That was when folks actually saw him. People's conversations stuttered in mid-sentence. You could practically see forks halfway to mouths. And then, I'm not ashamed to admit it, even years later, my dad fell silent. Now, if you've met my dad, you'd know silence is not one of his spiritual gifts. But in that moment, he froze. His hand kind of twitched at his side, his beer went slack, and he just whispered one word. "Danny?" Everyone turned to look. The man's expression went blank, like he wasn't sure whether he wanted to grin or run away. But then he nodded, nearly automatically, and said, "Yeah, it's me." And suddenly my world was turned upside down. I didn't know who Danny was. The name meant nothing to me. But from the collective gasp in the yard, the stunned faces, the way Grandma's hand flew up to her mouth, I knew something monumental was going on. That's when Maria elbowed me, her eyes wide, and whispered, "Holy crap. That's Dad's brother. That's your uncle." My uncle? Since when did I have an uncle named Danny? I'd spent 26 years with my boisterous, sprawling family, listening to every embarrassing anecdote and family secret exchanged around the dinner table. But never once, not once, had anyone spoken about me having another uncle. And now here he was, standing in my aunt's yard like a phantom masquerading as flesh and blood. Nobody knew what to do at first. Like when the uninvited guest of honor arrives, but realizes they are here rightfully. There was this feeling of tension, like the whole family was rebooting their brain together. Grandma moved first. She limped off the porch steps in her slippers, scraping them on the concrete, and she simply cupped his face in her hands as if she thought he was going to vanish again at any second. "Oh my God," she whispered through her tears. "I never thought I was going to see you again." The man, my supposed Uncle Danny, smiled, still stiff, uncomfortable, as though he was wearing something that didn't suit him. My father stepped forward, gingerly, his jaw set. I had no clue if he was mad, broken-hearted, or both. He stood a foot from me and growled, "Where the hell have you been?" It wasn't a warm welcome home. Not even close. It was more like a punch masquerading as a question. Danny's mouth opened, closed, and then at last, he spoke in a gravelly whisper, "Army." Then, around. The one word, army, rippled through the family. Abruptly, quiet talk all around. He enlisted in the military? Wait, I thought he just left town. I didn't even know he was alive. While I was there, completely flabbergasted. Shocked. Perplexed. Intrigued. Being the baby sister of the family, I'd grown up never being told this vast gorge of a story. How is it that a human being's own brother vanishes for 2 decades and no one ever brings it up? Who exactly was Danny then? And why did it feel like, even though he was hugged and patted and pulled into the fold, something was somehow, some way off? That night, I couldn't let it go. I might have simply eaten another slice of pie and left with the rest of them, but no, I found myself sneaking glances at Danny all evening long. Watching him not smile at the jokes, watch him linger on the periphery of the groups, watch his plate of food go almost completely uneaten. It was as if he'd been placed here from elsewhere. And secretly, I'd been having this gnawing feeling. My forgotten soldier uncle was hiding something. Big things. When the reunion slowed and the kids flooded the living room with sticky popsicle hands, I was restless. I couldn't shake the ache in my chest or the sense that I'd stepped into the second half of a book everyone else knew by heart. Suddenly, my whole childhood did not seem so innocent anymore. As if there'd been an empty chair at our supper table that we all politely skirted around. How do you grow up having no clue your dad even has a brother? I mean, it's not like you can lose a sibling. When evening and people were leaving, I lingered on the porch steps sipping a warm cola and trying not to seem too obvious about waiting. Danny remained, however, standing along the border of the yard under that buzzing yellow porch light. I needed to ask him something, a million something depend, 1 million things, really, but my tongue felt glued to the roof of my mouth. Finally, he took out a cigarette. And somehow that brief flash of flame broke the whole still spell around him. "Hey," I whispered, sliding down to the next step below him. He shifted his head in my direction, slow and controlled, as if weighing whether the touch was worth it. "Hey," he said, his voice so flat it was almost a sigh. I just continued to remind myself, this wasn't some anonymous stranger. This was supposedly my uncle, my dad's brother. But the familiarity just wasn't taking. "So," I stuttered, turning the soda can around in my hands. "You're my Uncle Danny?" There was a moment, a very brief moment, in which he almost smiled. But it vanished. "Guess so," he said, taking a drag on his cigarette. "Guess so." He exhaled, gazing out into the night. Cicadas were shrieking in the trees like a deafening symphony. "You don't need to say my name if it makes you uneasy." Uncomfortable. I let out a tense laugh. It feels like finding out you've got a twin brother whom you never knew about your entire life. So, yeah, little uncomfortable. That moment, his lips did flicker. Fair enough. I leaned forward, needing suddenly to connect with something. "Why didn't anyone warn me about you?" The words spilled out before I had a chance to think again. And at once his whole face closed up. His face went into shutdown mode, his eyes cutting back to the black woods like he prayed I'd remember what I just said. "It's complicated," he breathed. "It doesn't have to be," I prodded gently. "I mean, you're here now, right? Aren't you part of this family?" His fingers tapped the edge of the cigarette, ash drifting. He didn't answer at first. Instead, he allowed the silence to stretch, awkward and heavy. At last, he grunted, "Once you leave, some doors don't open again the same way." I chilled, despite the heavy summer air. There was something in the way he'd said it that wasn't just about being gone. It was about regret. Before I could pry further, the scream of the screen door splintered across the tension. My dad stepped out onto the porch, saw me sitting there, and scowled. "Hey," he told me, his voice low but commanding. "It's getting late. Get your grandma to help you finish up leftovers." So much like being 12 again, getting in trouble for listening in. But I knew something in his tone was not about dinner trays or leftovers. It was about me speaking with Danny. I obeyed, but a little rebellious fire was lit within. Why was this fellow's arrival creating so much chaos? Why was my dad being like I should turn a blind eye and not ask? The whole next week, I couldn't help but replay that day. I needed answers. I started casually bringing it up in group family conversation, trying to refer to Danny casually without seeming obsessive. Whenever I did mention him, though, the responses were concise. Curt. Brush off. Yeah, that was something, huh? Or don't worry yourself about it. Not even my grandmother, who enjoyed nothing more than getting into long descriptions of her younger years, wanted to talk about it. When I asked her softly, why wasn't I ever informed that Dad had another brother, she went quiet and only said, not all tales are easy to tell. Better that they stay behind. And then she shockingly changed the topic to peach cobbler. But the issue is, if you tell me not to go check behind the curtain, that's when I absolutely, really want to open it up. It was 2 weeks later, and I caught a glimpse of him again. Not at a reunion. This time I spotted him at the local coffee shop. Yeah, my little town has only one coffee shop, the sort of coffee shop that serves scones too dry, but lattes that are absolutely really good. I half dreamed, yawning over my cappuccino, as I noticed him at a corner table with a small black book lying open in front of him. His position was the same, slightly hunched shoulders, body positioned as if he desired to collapse into the wall. Without hesitation, I went over. Hey, I said, smiling, as if this was the most normal thing in the world, as if I'd just accidentally bumped into him and wasn't really thrilled. His face relaxed, his head coming up, more into recognition, not really into happiness, but into acknowledgement. Well, he said, didn't expect to see you here. You live around town? I asked, shoving the extra chair back before he could complain and sitting down opposite him. Sort of around there, he said indistinctly. Naturally, he was indistinct. Always indistinct. But he remained, didn't say I had to leave. So I leaned on the table, studying him. I've done a little detecting, you know, I teased lightly. Asking questions. Piecing together the parts of who you are. And everyone just clams up. Like they all got some sort of secret memo saying, don't tell her anything about Uncle Danny. His eyes blazed, and he stroked his chin with deliberate idleness. They're trying to shield you. That line hit me dead center in the chest. Keep me safe from you? Danny groaned and covered the notebook with his hand. I caught a glimpse of his writing, dense and compact, neat lines of letters, like clandestine confessions stuck on lined paper. He covered it with his hand before I could read. Not from me, he growled. From everything that came after. For some reason, that mysterious sentence unnerved me even more than if he had confessed to something terrible outright. I mean, what was that meant to say? But your family, I pushed gently. Doesn't that count for something? This time his eyes rose to meet mine, and for the first time I saw something raw there. Untempered pain that I had to glance away from. Family business, he murmured. That's why I shunned you. My throat closed. My curiosity was crossed with something else now, sympathy? Fear? Anxiety? Who is this guy? I lay awake that evening, staring up at my ceiling fan tracing circles, repeating those words in my head. That's why I stayed away. And here's the kicker, I started wondering if perhaps my dad wasn't so innocent in this story, either. Because if somebody just takes off for 20 years and doesn't say a word, then everybody has an equal amount of blame. And my dad's gruff behavior whenever Danny's name came up? That wasn't all about being angry. That was about being guilty, too. I had no proof yet. But the more I thought about it, the louder my instincts whispered something was being hidden from me. Some family secret hidden so deep in the family closet that no one was courageous enough to open the door. And now, it seemed like Uncle Danny waited just beyond it, hissing for me to turn the handle. By the third time I saw Danny, I no longer thought that it was coincidence. This time, it wasn't a reunion barbecue or coffee house. This time, it was the supermarket. I was picking up frozen peas in my shopping cart when I spotted him down an aisle, looking at the shelves as if they were hieroglyphic. He was carrying a basket over his arm with only a loaf of bread and a jar of peanut butter. He stood so out of place. The rest of the other individuals in that aisle were hurrying around, reading prices, dealing with screaming children. And Danny, beyond them again, stock still, human pause button. Instead of veering off into another aisle, I pushed my cart straight toward him. Hey, stranger, I said, my voice inanely friendly. He turned, blinking, like I'd startled him awake. When he recognized me, the edges of his mouth curved, not quite a smile, but not the usual paste of stone either. You following me? I laughed. Please. If I were following you, I'd pick someplace cooler than the canned soup aisle. He laughed softly, and for a moment it didn't feel like talking to the ghost of a man. It felt like talking to, well, family. To someone who might be known if he'd let him. I tilted my head. You know, if you're haunting all the haunts in town, you at least owe me a cup of coffee or a meal. Something. He adjusted his weight, clearly uncomfortable. You don't need to do that. I know. I want to, I insisted. Because right now you're just this puzzle piece of enigma, and everyone else makes it like I'm supposed to leave the blank space alone. That's not me. His basket swayed precariously in his arms, and for the first time since we'd met, I saw him hesitate like a child torn between wanting to please and not wanting to take the risk. I'll think about it, he finally said, his tone less hard now. I smiled, although part of me wished to grab his shoulders and shake the facts from him. Good. Don't hesitate too long. Peanut butter dinners can't be your diet alone forever. This time, he actually smiled. Just barely, but it was there. We did wind up having that meal, actually. A week or so thereafter, I caught him sitting outside at the coffee shop again. I decided I'd just go ahead and forego courtesy and sat down in front of him with 2 sandwiches I'd bought inside. Look, I said to him, slamming one down in front of him. You weren't going to order clearly, so I went ahead and done it for you. Ham and cheese. Simple choice. Danny glared at the sandwich like I had handed him a live grenade. You didn't have to. I know. Families nag and meddle and make sandwiches on each other. It's kinda our thing, I said, taking a bite of mine like there was no question. For the very first time, he had actually eaten something in my presence. Slowly, as if each mouthful was small comfort and a great struggle. That's when I pounced. Why did you leave? He froze with his bite. His jaw locked, and he let go of the sandwich. I already told you. It's complicated. Life is all complicated, I told him slowly. Ain't mean you get to never tell me why. The air between us became dense. Birds sang overhead, cars hummed down the road, but I only heard the thudding of my heart. Danny laid the sandwich down at last, his voice raw. Because I saw things. Things that lingered. And because your father was a man who wanted a clean life. A stable life. He didn't want my shadow across it. I took a swallow, furrowed brow. What does that even mean? He's your brother. You're a part of it whether he wants it or not. Danny glanced up at me, and I saw something in his eyes that made the hairs on my arm stand. Sadness. Not regular sadness, but this black, dug-up sorrow that had dug itself into him years earlier and persisted. I didn't just become part of the army, he spoke in a low voice. I came back different. Damaged. I couldn't belong at a dinner party debate about taxes and where to get mulch. I wasn't that guy anymore. And when I tried to be, it scared him. So I left. Made it easier on everyone. His words hit me hard, but my gut told me it was only partially true. He was evading again. There was something omitted. Afraid him how? I pressed. Danny glared at the black tabletop. A silence. Then, so low I could hardly hear, things I did, things I chose, that people like your dad can't forgive. And maybe they shouldn't. It was a naked confession. A hollow removed from an image grater. I wanted to yell. I wanted to demand the entire truth. But I simply sat there, slowly chewing, working not to allow my tears burn my eyes. Finally, I said, well, I think you're here. Even if you don't think you are. Anne, I don't know if you're ever going to tell me everything, but I need to know you. Okay. Danny's shoulders hunched down, and he nodded once. That was all I was going to get. That night, though, things exploded. Because when I drove into the driveway, Dad was standing on my porch, waiting. Arms folded, jaw set. The kind of pose that bellowed, you're in trouble. We need to talk, he said. I shut the door behind me and leaned against it. You tailed me. You've been spending time with him, Dad growled. Don't think I don't know. So what? He's my uncle. What's wrong with me? Because he's not what you think, Dad answered, his voice cracking in that gravely emotional tone I'd never heard him use before. There's a reason we never told you. Fury burned in me. Well, maybe if you'd just been honest to begin with, I wouldn't have to dig around for the truth like some detective in my own family. Dad pinched the bridge of his nose like he was holding back something explosive. He left because he broke trust. Not just mine, but this whole family's. Trust that can't be repaired. I crossed my arms. So I'm just supposed to take your word for it? Without ever knowing what happened. He looked at me then, really at me, tears brimming but not overflowing. If you knew what I know, you'd be ending the pursuit after him in such a hurry. The next thing spilled out of me like routine. Then tell me. His silence was deafening. He didn't. He just departed. And then, I knew something was really wrong. Both of them were lying, and the truth sat nestled in the dark crevice between their words. That was when suspicion became heavier, sharper. This was not about leaving the army or not fitting in with family barbecues. No, there was something sinister. And I was going to find it. I wish I could say that I uncovered the truth in a lighthearted manner, as if it fell from my mouth inadvertently while drinking sweet tea. But that did not happen. No, I blurted it out awkwardly, as rough as broken glass. Cut with harshness. Painful to comprehend. It was a month or so since that argument with my dad. I hadn't heard from Danny since the coffee shop sandwich. He ghosted me again, no surprise there. I have talked myself into maybe having scared him off by being so pushy. But then on one evening, just as the sun was setting pink and gold over the horizon, I heard the knock on my door. I opened it, and there he was. White under the porch light, hat in hand like a man waiting outside a confessional. "Can I come in?" he asked. And I let him. We sat at my small kitchen table. I made coffee, not the fufu lattes, just the kind that came out a little bit charred from my old drip coffee maker. He encircled his calloused palms around the mug as if he was grateful for the warmth. "I've got something to say to you," he began, his low and weathered voice growling. "But you've got to let me get it all out before you start asking questions." I nodded, thudding heart. He stared into his coffee and addressed it, not me. I believed when I went away to the army, I was doing something good, something significant. Perhaps even something heroic. But the world isn't like the speeches and posters. War changes how you think of yourself. What you will do. What you won't do. I returned a different man. Shattered in ways that didn't make sense. I swallowed hard, bracing myself. Later, one evening after I came home, your father and I argued. Something silly. I was volatile and angry. And he did something about me. He said I was dangerous. That I wasn't to be left alone with relatives anymore. And this is the thing, part of me believed him. Because I didn't believe in myself then either. He paused. My throat closed up. He'd left because he thought he wasn't safe? Slowly, Danny shook his head. So I just left. Not from him. From all of you. I thought I was saving everyone from having to tolerate me. From being disappointed. From being frightened. 20 years passed before I understood. In shutting myself out, I didn't just lose them. I lost myself along with them. I sat, completely motionless. His words seeped into me like icy rain. Not at all what I was expecting. No rip-roaring crime, no black scandal. Only shame, deep in his marrow. A man who believed he didn't deserve us. And yet, something still lingered on in my mind. So why return now? I whispered. His lips curled up into themselves. Because I didn't want to die a ghost. That one admission broke me wide open. I hadn't even realized I was crying until tears obscured my vision. I blinked them away forcefully. You're not a ghost, I told hard-fisted. You're here. You're here with me. Danny gasped for breath. Your dad doesn't see it that way. He never will. My chest ached. Dad's anger was always absolute, a wall no one could break through. But here, seeing my uncle vulnerable and small, I understood something. Anger is just grief in armor. The truth had finally dropped. Danny hadn't done some unimaginable something. He hadn't betrayed the family in the way I was so frightened he would. What he did was walk away. He walked away because he believed being there was poisonous. And the cost of doing so had been 20 years of silence. The days after our kitchen table confession were strange. I'd catch myself looking at my dad differently, wondering how much of his anger was directed outward and how much of it was him protecting his own heart from fracturing. It wasn't long before the two of them bumped into each other. Again. At my grandma's, naturally. Family soap opera never has good timing. It always surfaces when you just want mashed potatoes and quiet. Dad caught sight of Danny by the living room, leaned against the wall in silence. Their gazes met, and I could have sworn the entire house went quiet. Charged air. History bearing down like a weight. Dad finally growled, "You shouldn't be here." And Danny, for once, didn't cringe. He set his shoulders and stated, "I know. But I needed her." He glanced my way to know me. I couldn't do without that. Something within me broke at that moment. My dad gazed at me, his eyes full of the unsaid things throughout the years. He abandoned us when we needed him. When I needed him most. And now he's gonna just walk back in. Danny did not protest. He would not fight back. He just whispered, "I've been punishing myself every day since." His voice cracked on the word every. And I could see my dad's fists let go of their grip. Saw his chest labor with deeper breaths. He was not angry, he was broken too. Two brothers, standing 10 feet apart but 20 years away. No happy hug. No sweeping music, just silence, pain, stubborn pride. But in that quiet, I learned something. Family isn't clean-cut. It isn't always sewn up neat and tidy. Sometimes the only response is acceptance, not of what you wanted to have happen, but of what did. And in that second, I accepted mine. I chose to keep Danny with me, in spite of the messiness, the incompleteness. I chose to listen to his stories, even the shattered ones. I chose to look beyond him being the specter he appeared to be. And I chose to forgive my father in my heart for the silent years, because I finally understood that forgiveness wasn't about saying, it's okay. It was about saying, it happened, and I'm still here. Now, months later, I still don't have the Instagram perfect photo of family that I once assumed we had. But then again, maybe that is best. Maybe loving people isn't about perfection. It's about holding the hand through all the cracks, the chapters left out, the stammering reunions, and the burnt-tasting coffee, but worth it because it's shared. Danny might never receive my dad's pardon. He might never forgive himself completely. But me? He ceased to be a stranger on the porch. He became real. Imperfect, tormented, but present. And if life has taught me anything, it's that existing sometimes is more important than speaking the right word. So yeah, I have a forgotten soldier uncle. A guy who was away for 20 years and came back like a secret sent from the sky. He brings shadows. He brings guilt. But he brings stories, too, and the chance for me to learn about him before he dies. And even if nobody else can, I've decided that I won't let him slip away again. If you've ever experienced something similar, I'd appreciate your comments below. And if this one hit you even a little bit, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn that bell on.